I've had it with this dump. We got no food. We got no jobs. Our pets' heads are falling off.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to buckeyegrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom, can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom, the meatloaf.
No soup for you. Come back 1 year.
Hey, good Friday, and welcome back to the show. The Unscripted Ohio Podcast is roaring out of the station. I'm your host, Kyle Lamb. We are brought to you by buckeyegrove.com, as well as our new sponsor of the show, JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye, licensed in 33 states and more waiting. You'll also never pay for your appraisal with these guys. For all your inquiries, please visit them at jfqlending.com or email info@jfqlending.com. NMLS number 1639493. That is jfqlending.com, our proud sponsor of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. Hey, I hope everybody has had a great week. I know Ohio State basketball has not. I'm going to touch on that here for a few minutes. Kevin Noon, publisher extraordinaire of buckeyegrove.com, will be along, and we are going to talk some spring football because, you know what, this is a good time for the start of spring practice to roll around because basketball is just not pleasant right now. If you're an Ohio State fan, and if you're listening, I know you are, but if you are an Ohio State fan and you are accustomed to trying to have basketball see you through to the end of March and into April, well, this year, unfortunately, is not going so smoothly right now. Think back to last season. I mean, Chris Holtmann's first year on the job, Ohio State finished just one game out of the Big Ten title race. They very surprisingly had a real chance down the stretch to win the Big Ten. And it didn't come to fruition, but they were in the race. And this year has not gone very well. And look, I think people need to tone it down on the criticism of Chris Holtmann. And I saw some people that have been really frustrated, and understandably so. But you just got to give this guy a break. Cut him some slack because Ohio State is in a situation where they already were young and inexperienced to begin with. They have some guys that just are not ready to be natural-born leaders and natural scorers, go-to players right now. They're without Caleb Wesson at the worst time possible when they really need wins. Their offense was geared to run through Wesson, and it has. And I know it's had struggles with him in the lineup, but you're going to expect some even more struggles without him being in there. You add in injuries to C.J. Jackson, injuries to Kyle Young, Luther Muhammad really hitting the freshman wall. Dwayne Washington has hit the wall at times. I think he's gotten back his explosion a little bit and really stepped up. But there's just so many factors here. And so all I'm trying to say is this offense is bad. Spring football is coming at a great time to talk about that, and we will talk about it with Kevin here in a minute. But right now it's a welcome distraction because basketball is just not going well. And I think it's a combination of those factors. And, watching the game Wednesday night at Northwestern, it was just so perplexing. It's like that first half especially. The second half, ironically, got better. And I'm going to touch on that here in a second. But ironically, so I'm watching the first half, and they just couldn't run offense. They couldn't get anything going. It's like I was questioning what it was they were trying to do. And that's not a criticism of Chris Holtmann or the staff, but it's like watching these guys, they had no clue what they were trying to get out of a possession. They were running exclusively ball screen offenses, okay? And there were a couple things going into play here. Northwestern was showing big on these screens. So, that means that, the guy that was setting the screen, his man would come out over the screen and hedge, and and then they would have also the guy guarding the ball handler would come out too. So essentially, it's not really a double team, but you've got both guys committing to the ball handler. And, in that situation, Ohio State was having the screener roll. He was cutting towards the basket. But there were two problems with this, and I saw this so many times in that first half. The screener was not even looking, so he was cutting with his back to the passer. So there was no chance, even if he were open and had a chance to get a pass off of the screen, he wasn't ready to receive it, okay? But what's more is the ball handlers every single time were just kind of taking one dribble back, and they were not aggressively attacking. They were not trying to go around. They were not looking for the pass. They were just kind of lazily taking the ball, taking a step back, and just trying to avoid any potential trap or, pressure defense. And Ohio State was not, this was pointless. I mean, it wasn't getting anywhere with this kind of offense because you got to attack. The purpose of a ball screen is to either switch up a man, when a defense is switching everything, you're trying to switch and force a more advantageous matchup that you can attack, whether it's off of the bounce, off the dribble, whether it's off of dribble penetration, whether it's off a pass, whether it's a shot, maybe you've got a height advantage. Whatever this case may be, you're trying to get a more favorable matchup, or, you're going to attack off the ball screen. And Ohio State was just not doing those things. They weren't running any offense away from the ball. There wasn't any side-to-side passing, and without Caleb Weston in the game, there's no inside-out passing. So Ohio State got caught in all those situations, and they just were not running offense. Now, in the second half, Ohio State ran a lot better offense. They got a lot of good shots. They were getting open looks, something that they did not get in the first half. In the first half, they were taking challenge shots with 4 seconds left on the shot clock because they were running stale possessions and just not getting any good looks. But in the second half, I liked what they got out of their offense as far as looks were concerned. Now, they weren't hitting the shots all the time. They got hot there for a period where they cut it down to 5. They did get hot there for a moment, but they weren't hitting shots, most of the second half, even though they did score a lot more points than in the first half. But the biggest problem in the second half, as much as their offense picked up a little bit, their defense was really bad, especially transition. I thought they lost that game in the second half. When they made their run, they lost that game in transition defense. Now, to be fair, some of that was caused by poor shot selection. I think after they made that run, and then I felt like they, were trying to play hero ball because they kind of felt a little bit of momentum there, and they made some bad shots, some quick shots, some challenge shots. It led to Northwestern, a couple of Northwestern threes and a couple layups. And next thing you know, Northwestern's got it back up to 12. And Ohio State never really threatened after that. So that was the game. So now Ohio State is in a situation where they have to win on Sunday against Wisconsin to end the regular season. And it's not that their profile needs this win necessarily. Because believe it or not, I know people don't believe me when I say this. I talk about this on Twitter. I've been talking about it. You can tweet me at KYLam8. Look, I understand, in a vacuum, you look at this Ohio State resume and you say, you just watch them play, and they're not playing well right now. Without Caleb Weston, they're not a tournament team. Now, the good news is Caleb Weston should be back for the Big Ten tournament, but it may be too little too late if they don't win this game. And I'll get to that in a second as well. But the thing is, without him, they are not a tournament team. The last 2 games, they are playing miserable basketball, and they just do not have enough weapons to score, especially without him. I mean, not that they were scoring at a prolific pace with him, but without him, they just, it's an unfortunate timing because I think that they had something with him in there. And with the big game against Iowa by Justin Ahrens, I felt like they had something. And then all of a sudden he gets suspended and it just kills the momentum. And now without him, they're struggling. But they have to win this game because even though the bubble is really weak, and I urge people to go look at this bubble. If you don't do bracketology, don't say with any conviction that Ohio State won't make it. Because I promise you, the people that do this, and I've got a lot of friends that have been doing bracketology for 15, 20 years, and, I read the Joe Lunardis and Jerry Palms of the world, and, and of course my guy Rocco was on the show a few weeks ago. You know, these people all have Ohio State firmly in the field right now. And there's a reason for that, because it's like as bad as they're playing, as bad as their profile is, I promise you, there are bubble teams out there that are in the field right now, or would be in the field. Technically, there is no field, but would be in the field right now, even though they're actually worse shape than Ohio State. That's how bad the bubble is. So don't be one of those people with conviction that tweets at me and says, "Well, Kyle, you know, look how bad it is. They're not going to make the tournament." I know it's shocking, but they're in really good shape. Now, that being said, if they lose this game Sunday, and then they go and get beat by Illinois in the opening round of the Big Ten tournament on Thursday, or if they lose to Rutgers or whatever matchup they wind up with. If they lose that first game after losing to Wisconsin, yeah, they're probably done. They're probably NIT bound. I really do think that they need to win Sunday, not because they need this quality win, but they can't afford another loss on top of a potential first-round loss in the Big Ten tournament. If they win, now if they lose to Wisconsin, but then they win against Illinois and then beat Michigan State, yeah, they're probably getting in that scenario. But right now, the way they're playing, even if you throw Caleb in next weekend into the mix, I'm not sure that they can get back on track enough to win those games, do what they need to do to get into the NCAA tournament. So Ohio State basketball, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Kevin Noon coming up of Buckeye Grove here in a second. We will get into that as well as of course spring football, because basketball, it is what it is right now. Winning against Wisconsin on Sunday would be a huge deal for Ohio State. It's pretty much a must-win. Not that they have to win this to get in, but I think that they have to win this because of their psyche. I think that they have to. I think the only chance that they can do what it takes to get into the NCAA tournament is if they win this game. So that's why I am calling it a must-win. Not that they can't afford a loss, but that they can't afford what a loss would do to this team if they don't pull it off. All right, we're joined now by Kevin. And Kevin, my man, dude, it has been a hot minute. And, of course, I take responsibility for that. It's been so long since you've been on. But I'm glad you could finally make a repeat appearance here.
Yeah, it's been a moment since I've been on here. But, I think that everybody is not listening to Unscripted Ohio for my rants or anything along those lines. They can get all those on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. And, sometimes I'm even ashamed of some of the stuff I put on Twitter, but it's great being back on the show.
Well, I wanted to give you some time to talk about basketball, but this is a family-oriented show, and I thought maybe that would be a little bit too edgy. So we'll stick to the news of the week, spring practice.
Yeah, exactly. Spring practice. I mean, let's just face it. Ohio State's going to be a football school, and that's what everybody wants to talk about. I mean, we could end with a little basketball. I promise to be on my best behavior. It's been a bit of a mess, but yeah, let's talk about football.
Yeah, I'll ask you a basketball question or two, a token question at the end. We can't let you escape without getting your thoughts on that. But we will start with spring practice, because you did get to watch the first practice of the spring. Justin Fields' first practice as a Buckeye officially. Ryan Day's first spring practice as a head coach officially. Overall, in summation, you guys got to witness about an hour of the practice. In that hour, give me the summation of some of the things that stood out to you from what you were able to witness.
Well, the cynic in me would say they look great running around in shorts because let's face it, the first two practices of the spring, they're mandated to be in jerseys and shorts. There definitely is a schedule for when you're able to do each level in terms of shorts to shells to full padded practices. But I mean, it was great to see them out there running around. It was the first opportunity to see Justin Fields and the 6 early enrollees who are already on campus and going through spring ball. An opportunity to see some of the veterans and to see the 5 new coaches as well. I think everybody's eyes immediately gravitated toward Justin Fields and Matthew Baldwin. The quarterbacks are, of course, wearing black no-contact jerseys. Not that there was going to be any contact in shorts anyway. And, people were watching them throw. I mean, both quarterbacks had moments of where they were a little erratic, but I mean, it was their first opportunity to go through actual football drills coming out of winter conditioning. And as the practice went on, especially after we left, according to Ryan Day, both settled down. And I think beyond that, I mean, everybody's focusing on, who's lining up with the ones, who's lining up doing this. But let's not forget that it is the first practice, and we have a long ways to go between now and August 31st when they welcome Florida Atlantic to Ohio Stadium.
Isn't that the favorite part of your job, that people are so starved, and we're all guilty of it. So I'm not picking on fans in particular, but people are so starved for information and insight that it's like you guys are in a position where you got to go watch, a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour of practice, and you feel somewhat obligated or compelled to maybe make observations that there's just not a big enough sample size to make, because people want to know who's going to be starting, who looked good, who didn't look good. Don't you just love how you feel like you got to force yourself to come up with stuff?
Oh, absolutely. We can only talk about bourbon hunting season and our favorite new restaurant and the Oscars on the message boards for so long. Everybody is ready for that red meat of talking about college football, and that's our first opportunity. And a lot of credit goes out to Mark Gibler and Cameron Thompson, who both wrote very detailed practice observations while I was doing photos and video. And I've gone through some of the video that I had and going through and watching it and trying to come up and answer the questions the best that I can. But yeah, the truth of the matter is, are we going to know that are they going to be a better red zone offense type of team? Yeah, we're not going to know that off of practice one. Is the back seven going to play better in defense? Yeah, we're not going to know that coming out of practice one. I can tell you that Zach Harrison is a physical freak, as a true freshman. I can tell you that Chase Young looks like a Greek god out there. I can tell you that the quarterbacks look pretty good as the practice went on throwing the ball. Again, I can tell you a lot of things along those lines, but yeah, we're not going to solve any of life's mysteries here after the first practice, but I guarantee you we're not going to have those mysteries solved after the spring game, which counts as practice number 15. A lot of this is going to continue into fall camp, and honestly, we really won't know a lot about this team until about week 4, week 5 of the season anyway.
Kevin, I do want to ask you specifically about Fields. What did he look like, maybe relative to your expectations of seeing him the first time in person? And then I also want to ask a two-part question. What did, Ryan Day, of course, met with the media after practice. I'm kind of curious, his summation of how he felt Fields is looking so far.
Well, the one thing I'll say about Justin Fields is we all kind of got spoiled watching Dwayne Haskins throw the ball. And trying to go back to spring practice 2018, that seems like a million years ago. I can't really tell you what he looked like at that point. Is Justin Fields out there throwing the ball on a line the way that Dwayne Haskins did? No, probably not really. But I think that he still looked pretty good out there throwing the ball. We didn't get to see him out there with his scrambling ability or anything along those lines. I mean, even with that being said, he's going to have that no-contact jersey on, as Ohio State only really has 3 scholarship quarterbacks at this point, and cannot risk any sort of just fluke injury happening. But I think he checks off a lot of the boxes. You can see the athleticism. You can see that he's confident out there making the throws. I mean, he was okay hitting the guys in the flat. He had a pretty nice deep ball. He was, he ended up throwing it into traffic a couple times in some of the drills that they were going in and doing, but that's to be expected. And Ryan Day in the press conference, I mean, he's going to sit there and say, look, this is a legitimate quarterback battle between not only he and Matthew Baldwin, but throw Chris Chugginoff into there. I think honestly, Justin Fields, it's his position to lose. That's my opinion on this. But I think that he sat there and said, we need to give these guys an opportunity to get out there, do things, and not have them be afraid to fail, because you learn from the failure and those types of mistakes you make, and that's where you become a better quarterback. But if you're so afraid that if you make a mistake or 2 mistakes that you're dropped to the bottom of the line, we're not doing anybody any favors. So, you can tell that Ryan Day has not. I mean, he's polished enough that he's not going to play his hand early and say anything that he should in terms of timelines or things along those lines. But I can tell that he's definitely very impressed with, the tools that Justin Fields brings to the table. It's just a matter of getting him to utilize them and grow with them.
I want to go back. You're confusing me, Kevin. Are you trying to suggest Chug is not the betting favorite in Vegas to win the job?
Well, I wouldn't want to influence the odds or anything like that, but I think Chris Chugunov is going to be somebody who is a great guy to have around the locker room, and he'll be an insurance policy as your third stringer. And he's doing a lot of work towards that master's degree, so God bless him. Inside
intel here on the Unscripted Ohio podcast. Kevin, a lot of obviously the quarterback situation, I mean, we can all assume Fields is going to win the job eventually. Depending on when it's announced, it's hard to say, but we know obviously Fields is going to be the guy, and his performance is going to be due in part to what happens with that offensive line. And there's going to be technically 4 new starters, but as Ryan Day pointed out in the press conference, some of these guys have had experience before. They may not have gotten a lot of starts, but they've been in there. Wyatt Davis played a lot down the stretch, and they're going to have Jonah Jackson coming in this fall. I thought, to me, the interesting thing that Ryan stated in the press conference, and we kind of heard insinuations about this, through our own staff members on Buckeye Grove and elsewhere. But he kind of mentioned that the plan late last year was to get Josh Myers starting at center even late in the season and moving Michael Jordan to guard before the year was even over. I thought that was interesting. He stated that was actually their plan, and it didn't end up happening. But it tells me that they are really, really excited about Myers' future and potential here.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like Jackson's going to be destined to play that guard position instead of center. I mean, he has the capability of playing either. So, yeah, you get a lot out of that. And you sit there and you look at the line, and Thayer Munford isn't going to be going through spring practice. I mean, he's on the rehab as well, and that means that they're really not going to have anybody with any significant starting experience going through spring practice. So that's going to give a lot of young guys a lot of opportunities to get reps. But then you're going to figure by the time you get to fall camp there, Munford's going to be fine. Jonah Jackson's going to be within the program. And then things are going to shake a little bit more there. But, I mean, I can remember a lot of years where Ohio State basically was about 5.5 offensive linemen where they had their starting 5 and then maybe a guy who was ready to go at one position or the other, but not a lot of diversity there. I think that this spring will give Ohio State the opportunity maybe to have several guys who are ready just in case, because let's face it, Ohio or college football is a very physical game, and injuries do happen. And Ohio State has been pretty fortunate through the seasons not to have to deal with a lot of injuries on the line. They did lose Demetrius Knox in the Michigan game, and that ended up creating some bouncing around because of that. But with that being said, I think that this line really has an opportunity to be a pretty good line. I mean, that's a pretty big statement with seeing the grand total of one practice with 2 guys who are legitimately not going to be, or 2 guys who are going to be starters who are not out there practicing. But I think that things are going to be pretty good on the line, and that's going to be a huge thing for a team that Urban Meyer, the previous head coach, is, you may have heard of him or not, said that this is a line-driven team, and I don't expect Ryan Day to get away from that.
So defensively, a lot of Ohio State fans are understandably holding their breath to see what happens with the defense. And I want to ask you about a comment that Ryan Day made in the press conference, because it didn't get a lot of play. And I listened to it 2 or 3 times, and I'm trying to make sense of it because maybe I'm reading too much into this. But he made a statement that, obviously defensively, I think, I'm paraphrasing here. He said, obviously we made a change on defense, and it was a tough choice to make. But we think that the change will help us. Now, am I reading into this wrong, or is he insinuating, because we already kind of know that Tabor Johnson and Bill Davis were kind of ushered out, very gingerly and asked to look at other jobs. But we've kind of been assuming that Greg Schiano left willingly and was not pushed out. But the way he made that comment sound, if I'm reading into this correctly, maybe he was kind of nudged out as well. Am I reading this wrong? I listened to it 3 times and I still can't tell.
Right. Well, I think that they came to a mutual decision that it was probably time for Greg Schiano to move on. I mean, we don't have to go all the way back to what happened with him having the Tennessee job and then not having the Tennessee job. I mean, I think that all things being equal, if Ohio State was a top 10 defense last year in total defense and scoring defense, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But I think some things had gotten a little tired there, and it was time to make a decision and maybe make a little bit of a move, and they did make that move by going up north and getting Greg Madison, and then going out into the NFL ranks and bringing in Jeff Hafley and having the old crafty veteran in Madison and the young guy who was born after Madison started his coaching career, to be quite honest, in Jeff Hafley. And look at doing some different things. I know it was a very maddening thing for Ohio State fans to see the Buckeyes stay in man pretty much at all times, and teams had just really kind of figured out how to solve that with the quick slants and some things like that. I don't think we're going to see a defense that's necessarily going to be, as locked in on that. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Ohio State having that Viper position, and whether it being like kind of a 4-2-5 type of defense, and with that Viper, whether or not it's more of a speedy linebacker, or you bring Brendan White down into that position to be able to play that. And Ryan Day even kind of said that there would be some things that would be situationally there depending on what you're going against there. So back to the main issue with Greg Schiano. I wouldn't say that he was necessarily shown the door, but I think that everybody kind of came to an arrangement that things had grown a little stagnant, and it was time to freshen things up, because maybe the defense in its current iteration had kind of been solved.
And I thought it was kind of the tone I took away too was, as Day mentioned, that he will be calling plays at least this year for sure. At least that's his goal, which that is an interesting discussion in itself. We can have another time, but he did confirm that he wants to call plays this year. But he also kind of gives off the impression that he wants to have. He really is allowing Madison and Hafley to take control of the defense, and I think he has a lot of confidence in them being able to do that. But at the same time, he seems really genuine and sincere that the status quo from what happened last year is not acceptable. And, I know coaches are going to say all the right things and publicly, and they're going to say changes are coming, but I really feel he means it. And it seems like this is Madison and Hafley's defense this year, and Day seems to have a lot of confidence that they're going to right the ship.
Yeah, exactly. And if you go to Buckeye Grove today, you'll see a piece I wrote called Finding the Defensive Fix here on Friday, kind of talking about that issue and how Ryan Day kind of laughed that he's going to have to go over and remember to go check on the defense, because he's been an offensive guy his entire career, going back to New Hampshire where he was the quarterback. And, he's never coached on the defensive side of the ball, but he has supreme faith in all the guys on the defensive side. I mean, remember, he pretty much gutted that side of the ball except for Larry Johnson, and he, has obviously been very complimentary of everything that Larry has done with the defensive lines. Now it's a matter of being able to get some things done with the back seven, and the combination of what Madison has been able to do, and with what Hafley's meant in the secondary. I definitely think that it's going to be a situation where he has supreme faith in them, but conversely, he cannot take himself out of the picture and just say, well, I'm just going to focus on quarterbacks, or I'm going to focus on offense. He brought in Mike Yursich to be the passing game coordinator. All of that is taken care of. I mean, he knows even in his 3 games where he came in Urban Meyer's stead during the suspension, what it takes to be a head coach, but it's a little bit different driving Urban Meyer's bus and now driving his own bus. He wasn't able to really make any wholesale changes in those first 3 games of 2018. While he's not looking to make gigantic changes here for the 19 season, it is his program, it is his legacy at this point, and he understands the enormity of it.
Last thing I want to ask you on the football front before we get a couple basketball questions and call it a day. Did you see any kind of difference? Because, under Urban Meyer, one of the things about Ohio State practices that you hear from everybody, it's a very fast-paced, very up-tempo practice, and they're constantly moving. I know it's spring practice, and it's just 1 hour, so it's kind of tough to gauge, but did you get the sense that was going to be the same thing here under Ryan Day and with all these new defensive coaches? Did you get the same vibe in that first practice that you have in the past?
Yeah, it was very up tempo. I mean, there was a lot of moving around. They didn't have a lot of first year guys that they were having to teach how to practice, essentially, with only 7 first year guys between the 6 early enrollees and Justin Fields. So they're not changing a lot of the names of things. And I mean, the first period of practice was still punt. I mean, you know, it was very familiar with all that, and I would say that there was a good amount of energy with it. I mean, I think in the first practice, though, everybody's so excited not to be doing mat drills anymore that even though, I mean, practice can be a definite grind out there, it certainly is a lot better than what they were having to do in terms of just the sheer, you know, just sweat equity, you know, physical power that they were having to deal with under the watchful eye of Mickey Marotti on the mat drills. That, you know, it was a welcome change of pace.
You know, Kevin, I was thinking that, you know, there's been a lot of talk about what Ryan Day's stance would be on wearing blue around the facilities. I got to thinking, you know, this first practice, you guys were joking around our intern Andy showing up a little late here for that first practice. So I was thinking next time he does that, maybe you should have him wear blue and he can be the guinea pig to see how Ryan Day handles it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I actually have a funny story on that. I was at an Ohio State camp a couple of years ago, trying to even remember who it was. One of the support staff. I was wearing a blue, I mean, not even like the blue of that team up north, but it was still blue, Rivals.com like polo. And one of the coaches came up, the support guys, and is like, "What are you doing wearing blue here? You should know better than that." I'm like, "Well, if you want to give me an Ohio State shirt, I'm more than happy to change." They're like, "No, just don't wear that shirt again." So, you know, we'll see what it's like under Ryan Day. I mean, I definitely think he's going to keep a lot of that stuff in place. I still haven't heard anybody really utter the word Michigan around there. But, you know, Urban Meyer was kind of next level with a lot of that stuff.
Well, you know, a couple token basketball questions here, and then I'll let you go. So, you know, obviously, you know, Ohio State has this great breakout performance against Iowa, and you know, maybe it was just a sample size issue. Maybe it was an outlier, and we shouldn't read too much in it because obviously, you know, we know Justin Ahrens is not a 29-point-a-game scorer, but still, it felt like Ohio State finally found something that game, and it just seems to me, because they have not been a good team whatsoever the last two games. They clearly, on offense and defense, miss Caleb inside. I feel like the timing of this suspension could not be worse for this team because they are lost without him as an inside presence, and just kicking the ball inside and having him being able to kick it back out to shooters, it has really disrupted this offense.
Well, not only that, but keep in mind that Kyle Young is injured and he's trying to play through it. C.J. Jackson is injured and he's trying to play through it. Luther Muhammad can't hit water in the ocean right now. I mean, the freshman wall hit him. He didn't hit the freshman wall. And then you take your best offensive player off of the court. I mean, all of those things together are why we saw Ohio State go, what was it, 0 for 14 to start the game against Northwestern. Four made field goals in the first half, something to that effect. Obviously, the timing couldn't be worse. I mean, Ohio State is absolutely playing itself out of the tournament field. But, you know, if we're going to see anything like we've seen over the last four halves of basketball, you know, maybe making the tournament wouldn't necessarily be the best thing in the world, because not that it's going to set your program back, and not that this year is going to carry into next year. But, you know, this team is definitely having issues and does not look like the team that put 90 points up on Iowa. And, yeah, I agree. Justin Ahrens is not going to get you 29 all that often. But watching that Northwestern game on Wednesday night was about as maddening as it gets. And just, you know, open shots weren't going in. They were taking contested shots that weren't even going close. I think there was a point where Ohio State had more air balls than it had made field goals. And even with all that being said, they closed it to 5 points in the second half. It was 47-42. And then, you know, very reminiscent of the game at Michigan State, Ohio State just could not find anything to finish the game. And then, you know, credit Northwestern, a team that had lost 10 league games in a row. They were able to find a way to just pull away. And it really sets up just really a make or break type of game on Sunday against Wisconsin, because I don't see this team, just even as injured it is. Let's just say Caleb comes back for the start of the Big Ten tournament. Just as injured as this team is, they are not built to play back-to-back or beyond games. So the tournament is not set up well for this team. So they better find a way to beat Wisconsin and beat them handily to try and lock in at that point, because I don't see any situation where this team makes it Saturday in Chicago. This team likely is a Thursday out.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think this is a must-win from a profile standpoint, but the problem is, I think you summed it up perfectly, is even though they could pick up a win or two in the Big Ten tournament and still sneak in, with this team being in the situation that it's in, with CJ injured and Kyle Young injured, and Caleb would be coming back from a suspension, and Luther Muhammad, as you mentioned, he's hit the wall. Even Chris Holtman has pretty much admitted that they think they overused him a bit, and he's hit that wall, and they don't think he's probably not coming back from it. So asking this team to be in a situation where they need to win 1, 2, maybe 3 games in a row in the tournament, I just don't think that's very realistic where they're at. So I think that this Wisconsin game, not so much from a profile or a quality win standpoint, but just because of the alternative, I think they have to win on Sunday to really feel good about getting into the tournament.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really not confident that we're going to see Caleb Weston back for that game. So that makes it even that much more of a daunting task. I think that you have Caleb Weston out there, and I'm not saying coming off of a suspension, he was never suspended. I'm just saying Caleb Weston inserted into that lineup certainly would give them an opportunity to do it. But without him, I don't necessarily see a way of where they're going to be able to generate enough offense at this point. Dwayne Washington has been doing his best out there, but he is a streaky shooter, to say the least. And beyond that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're not going to be able to count on Keyshawn Woods for 13, 15 points a game. I mean, he was their main offense. He and Dwayne Washington in Evanston on Wednesday night. So, I really, hesitate to even give a lot of thought to how the Sunday game is going to go. I mean, we'll find out later here on Friday the status of Caleb for that game. But as I've said, I just do not expect to see him back before they go to Chicago.
Well, Kevin, it has been a pleasure as always, and we'll be sure to get you on a little sooner this time. We won't wait it's been 6 months or whatever since the last time you came on. We won't wait that long again. We'll get you on again here before the end of the spring, and definitely as the spring game approaches, we'll be sure to talk to you more about what you've seen throughout practice.
Absolutely. Have your people talk to my people. We'll set up a time.
Yeah, we'll get that. We'll do some lunch. We'll do lunch with our people sometime, and have them set that up. So. Kevin Noon, you can catch him, of course, on BuckeyeGrove.com. He is a publisher, does great work, and my boss, and I'm proud to say that. And, of course, you can also check his rants out on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. And that is going to wrap it up for the Unscripted Ohio podcast for Friday. Thank you again to Kevin for joining us and talking some spring football and a little bit of basketball as well. And as I said earlier, thank you to JFQ Lending for sponsoring the show. Once again, you can visit jfqlending.com for all your inquiries or email them info@jfqlending.com. So very, very excited to be talking some more spring football the rest of March and into April. We'll have Mark Gibler on, get his assessment of time. We'll have Kevin back. Maybe we'll get one of our interns, Cam or Andy, to talk what they've seen as well. But lots of spring football talk coming up. We will be back on Monday. Of course, you can catch the show every Monday and Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com. Every Wednesday, you can catch our sister podcast, Scarlet and Great, by Corey Thompson and Johnny Lunsford. So we will be back on Monday. Of course, you can listen to us on your archive of choice. In addition to BuckeyeGrove.com, you can hear us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. That's going to do it for me. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will talk to you again Monday.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.